Hey, it's Alan here.
And Bre.
And we are
the hunter and the hippie.
Connected through yoga and bonded by our love of the wild places and the love for outdoors, we've come together to share our conversations about life.
Well, maybe more so what we've learned or are continuing to learn about life.
And that there's no one way to do it. Life, that is.
And hopefully provide you with some teeny tiny bits of inspiration to connect deeper with yourself, others, and our great Mother Earth.
All right. Enough already about the podcast. Let's just get to the podcast.
No
Awesome,
beard.
here we are.
No beard.
Did you say no beard?
No beard.
Yeah, I know it, and it's like so fitting for our topic today, right? Like my gender role, my gender identity is like missing now that I shaved my entire beard off.
I know, me too. Just a few.
So there's a lot to talk about today. Could be a little heavy of a topic, but you're gonna get us started with the right way.
All right, let's get started. Find your comfortable seat. Soft gaze or close your eyes. And bring your awareness fully into your natural breath. And begin to slow down your inhales and exhales. You might find this lengthening breath just through your nose. Or maybe you breathe it in through your nose and slowly out through your mouth. Begin to notice how it feels from your natural breath into this slow, lengthened inhale and exhale. And as you continue to slow down your breath, notice how this feels throughout your body. Notice if there's any changing sensations. A slowing down of your heartbeat. A general ease that begins to melt down from the crown of your head. Or maybe nothing changes at all. And just feeling it. Just being with whatever shows up right now. And knowing that whatever shows up is welcome. It's okay. And we'll take 3 deep inhales through our nose and big open mouth exhales just to release anything we're holding on to. So deep inhale, fill all the way up. And big open mouth exhale, let it go. And again, taking in and giving back. And full expansion. And complete release. And when you feel ready, slowly fluttering your eyes open if they aren't already. And coming into our podcast.
Thank you for setting the mood and setting the tone.
Selfishly for myself. No, just kidding.
think we're both going to need it. So, this week you texted me. You sent me a text, and sorry, I'm getting my notebook. You know what? I want to read the text. If that's okay. Is that okay if I read the text?
Which one?
The one that really started this conversation about you being out of the loop.
Oh, yeah.
Is that okay if I share that?
Are we going to go right into it?
I don't know.
Okay. Let's do it.
So I mean, we don't have to go right into it.
Yeah.
I want to share, I guess, what led us to now. Led us to talk about gender roles, gender identity. You know, I think we were gonna talk about it anyway at some point.
Yeah.
If everyone was listening in our first podcast, we talked about our superpowers. Or I should say, Bre really talked about her superpowers. And yeah, so I think at some point we were going to get to it. I think just some current events brought this topic front of mind.
Yeah, I think also to stem off of what you're mentioning is we had some feedback asking to expand on that part of the conversation from our first episode, and just this gender role identity, you know, and just how my own personal experience with it and how that looked and what doors opened and closed in what society was pushing. And so that was the initial, like, let's bring this to a conversation. And Alan, I know you had also offline had mentioned, you know, having some feelings about it. And then I'll let you go from here in terms of this week, which we're recording, 2 weeks before release. So that's a good thing to know. And yeah, go for it.
Go for what?
Are you gonna read the message I sent you?
Share the message. Share the message.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So again, right, like everything that we've said, right, has just led up to today, and both Bre and I are not really followers of the news. I would say that you are probably a little more disconnected. Not that that's a bad thing, right? Just a little more disconnected than I am. But you sent me a text and you said, so I'm quoting this. So, quote, "I'm kind of not up-to-date person on the news, and I just found out about the executive order around transgender competing in women's sports. This makes me sad for biological women in sports." End quote. And I agreed. In short, right, again, this is just our brief short chat in text message, and we'll dive deeper into this, but my response is, quote, it's so sad because we are anatomically different as well as hormonally different. And it continued on with, "I have no issue if you're transgender, but to rob women of their athleticism is super sad." End quote. So, and again, we don't have to dive right into that topic, right? I think there's many topics that we're going to cover here as far as gender roles and gender identity goes, and superpowers. But I'll let you steer really to start off, and you know, if we want to dive right into that, that's cool by me.
Yeah, I think we might as well dive into it. And it's very interesting because this week is also Girls and Women's in Sports Day.
Right.
And
that was Wednesday, right?
Wednesday,
February 3rd. February 3rd. It was Women's in Sports Day.
Yes. So, which is awesome. Athletics has been such a huge part of my life and has molded me into the person that I am today. And it also was something that I struggled with kind of gender roles even within sports, because I had this mentality of like, I should be like just as good as a male, you know, as a female. And the reality is, we're just, like you said, anatomically different. We build muscle mass differently. I mean, that's even ethnicity wise, people build muscle mass differently. And that's why you do see certain ethnicities stronger in some sports than other sports. And it's not to make it a race thing, it's just the reality of genetics. And there are exceptions. Anything I think is important to talk, like, preface today is that there's always exceptions to any of these broad, quote unquote, like rules or generalizations.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're so right. Like that's the first thing people go after are those exceptions, and they want right. Like in no means are we arguing, right? It's just people want to come at you with, oh, we have exceptions to talk about, uh, for sure, but those exceptions, that's exactly what they are. They're people that stand out, in an area where they typically don't. Where if you look at the average group of that population, women being a perfect example, right? That's why there's women's sports separated from men's sports. It's also why a lot of sports, even in the male and female, there's weight classes too, right? Depending on the sport. A lot of like fighting sports, there's weight classes, because those things have a lot to do with it. So I agree that these are the exceptions. We're talking more in the generalizations, more in the average population.
And I have to say, transgender is an exception as well, right? It's a minority. It's a small percentage of females or males.
Yep.
And I, again, want to say, like, however you identify is up to you. That is your choice. I'm not taking away your rights for that, your choices. I don't believe in discriminating based on someone's sexual identity choice. However, my personal feelings around this is that needs to be its own category. We fought to make women's sports a category. So in 2000 I played water polo. I swam growing up. I played water polo in high school and college, and I played water polo overseas in the Netherlands. And I was in high school 98 to 2002, and the first year women's water polo was an Olympic sport was in 2000. That's very recent, and there's a lot of years fighting to make that a women's sport, and it wasn't much longer before that, or previously before that it became a college sport. So what happened was women were playing on men's teams. Very few are going to make it onto the college level when you're on a team with other men. People are going to take the best players, and there were exceptions. However, that's not the general rule. So by fighting to make women's water polo a sport in college, we created opportunities for women to go to college who wouldn't necessarily go to college, and maybe even get a scholarship to go to college. And now, if anatomically, a biological male who has had testosterone in their body for X number of years and they have developed to a certain age that way, they are going to be better than a female in that sport, which means a college team is going to want to recruit the best players, which now means we're robbing females of their spots on those teams. There's a reason that transgender males, so females who are identifying as a male and maybe going through the process of a sex change and hormonally, they're allowed to compete immediately.
Yeah.
Okay? But if you're a transgender female, you're transitioning into a female from being a male, you have to wait a certain number of months, or it's like a year from when you identify and start taking female hormones. So why is that? Because there's a difference. That is bottom line. If you're making different rules for a transgender male than a transgender female, there's always obviously an advantage.
Yep. Yeah, and to that point, right, the hormones are huge in that, right? So you brought up testosterone. If you think about PEDs, right, in sports, right, PEDs is performance enhancing drugs. Testosterone is like the number one. Right? There's many others, right, but testosterone is the number one thing that is performance enhancing. It increases your muscle mass. It increases, right, your I'm not finding the right word. I want to say rage, but it's not rage. Like your aggression levels, right? It makes you a tougher opponent in general, right? Estrogen is not, right? You don't hear about bodybuilders, injecting estrogen. You don't hear about Lance Armstrong injecting estrogen to be a performance enhancing drug, right? So I wholeheartedly agree in that sense that, right, someone who is transitioning from male to female, they've had testosterone in their body for how long? And depending, I think you hit on so many points already, but like you look at a cultural background, you look at someone who is from Eastern Europe or Russia or Iceland, and you look at the size and stature of those athletes, right? Again, generalization, there are exceptions, okay? But when you think of those Viking, right? Quote, I'm quoting, right? Like everyone's watching YouTube, right? Like when you think of that Viking blood, Joe Rogan says that he's part Neanderthal, right? That Neanderthal blood, right? They are big people, right? I am not that, right? Like I'm the opposite of that. But that's not my culture, right? So you think of these people that, if you watch Game of Thrones, Halfthor Bjornsson, right? He's from Iceland. They call him the Mountain. He's literally a mountain, and that is all built off of testosterone. Right, it's not estrogen. So that's, I think that's something that's really important. In like you let a male transition to a female, and at what level? Right now, the executive order that was signed by our President Biden, is it's really interesting, right? Because you said discrimination, right? Like you don't want to discriminate. Discrimination is a really finicky word, right? Like, we don't want to be accused of discrimination, but it's something that we all do. And then, like, there's all this stuff going on right now, and I'm not going to get into this, but there's like, unconscious bias and this, that, and the other. But discrimination at some level is beneficial. And I'm not saying, right, like everyone's going to take this out of context. They're going to play these audio clips, right? And, they're going to say, Alan's up for discrimination. That's not what I'm saying, right? I'm not for discrimination, but discrimination is inherent in just human beings, right? We are going to, it's part of our fight or flight mechanism, is to make split second assessments of situations, of people, of things, in order to keep ourselves alive, right? And it goes back to, right, I talk about saber-toothed tigers in my yoga class, right? When you look and you're face-to-face with a saber-toothed tiger, you're not going to think, oh, look at the kitty, I want to pet it, right? Teeth growling. No, like there's something that you have to make. You have to make assessments, judgments based on what is standing in front of you, and say, okay, I need to, in the case of a saber-toothed tiger, I need to be afraid. And so in this executive order, it doesn't specifically say transgender can play in sports. What it says is sports are not allowed to discriminate against sexual orientation.
Gender identity.
Say that again.
It's gender identification.
Gender identification. Thank you. Right. So it's worded in a way that if you're against it, you look bad. Right. Like, oh, I don't agree with this executive order because, well, I'm for discrimination. No, that's not what we're saying. Right. What we're saying is that there is a difference, and we have to acknowledge that difference, and it's okay, right? Men and women are different, and that's okay. And I think we're going to get deeper into that. But like we have to just start start saying, yes, we're different, and that's cool. Like we are supposed to be different people, we're going to talk about superpowers. Imagine if we all had the same fucking superpower. That'd be stupid, right? Like, we'd just all be sitting around, like, just flying in circles if we all could fly, right? Like, it wouldn't be a superpower, right? A superpower is what makes you different.
And I think what's important is by acknowledging the differences, we're actually doing better for people. And this is one thing I didn't think I'd dive into right now, but we're going for it, is we can't serve a transgender female best if we're treating them as a biological female. And we can't serve a biological female best if we're treating them as a transgender female. And this is why. I bleed out 7 days out of the month, okay?
Yeah.
A biological female has to go through the potential of a rape and choosing if they're going to take the morning after pill, or if they didn't know, have an abortion. That is an experience, I'm sorry, but a transgender female will never experience, okay? You have to miscarriage. Like, all of these things that a female biologically experiences, and if we treat everyone the same, we can't. And then I, as a biological female, will never know what it's like to go through the process of changing my hormones and to be able to and have to tell the world that I identify with a sex that I wasn't born as. Like, those are all also like real experiences, and we can't serve them, and we can't support them, and we can't glorify or whatever it might be, or fight for them if we're trying to make everybody the same.
Yeah, I agree. So you said one thing, and I want to call you on it just to keep us all honest, right? Like, you said, and I don't just want anyone to call us out on it, right? You said rape, and I knew you were going to like pregnancy and that type of stuff. Like, so transgender women can experience rape.
Everyone can experience rape.
Yes, everyone can experience rape. And where you were going was just to the pregnancy portion, the Plan B, the morning after pill. So I just want to make that clear that, yes, anyone can experience rape. We're not saying that only women experience rape.
Correct.
Or biological women experience rape. Okay.
But the aftermath of it is different.
100%.
On a and that's what I'm saying, on a physiological level, okay? Traumatically, mentally, every single one of those, for anyone, it's going to be a different experience. But
absolutely,
what I'm trying to bring back to is, again, these physiological differences that do exist. And I'm probably going to get a lot of heat for saying this. Why is it that it's just a food for thought? Elizabeth Warren tries to claim that she was part Native American, okay? And she gets bashed, right? She apologizes for this, that. Hilaria Baldwin recently, everyone found out she's not from Spain. Why aren't people allowed to identify with different cultures or races or beliefs? And so it's like, we're okay with this, but we're not okay with that. We need to really dig deep into some of these double standards that are getting thrown around, and also then not be so critical of people who maybe say, like, I don't think that transgender females should be competing against biological females. That is no difference than saying Hilaria Baldwin. I mean, again, I'm gonna get. I feel it already. Oh boy!
I totally agree. I actually agree. I had this discussion with my wife the other day. Unfortunately, I can't go into detail about what the discussion is about. I'm trying to think of a way to say it. You have to come back to me. But I agree. I think that you make a valid point, right? And I'll use this. So, for example, I'm Italian, and my wife isn't. But to me, my wife's Italian now, right? Like, she's experienced the culture. She's experienced growing up, or not growing up, but she's experienced 14 years of knowing, understanding what living with an Italian male is like, and then experiencing living, or being around his Italian family that is loud and curses, and there's gender roles in that. So I think that absolutely, like, we should be able to say, like, yes, it was Stephen Baldwin's wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alec Baldwin's wife. So yeah, maybe, right, maybe she's not from Spain, but maybe that's what she identifies with as, her culture. And who's to tell her or us that that's wrong? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't give her an advantage in a sport against other people. And that's the difference. And if you were born into the wrong gender, that's awful that you have to go through that and experience that through however long that takes for you to experience, like, to get through to transition. But once you go into competing in a sport, which you've already brought up, right, that women fought long and hard for, right? Think about women's sports. Women didn't play sports outside of World War II when the men weren't around to play sports, mm-hmm. and they got to play baseball just until the men got home, and then once the men got home, no more sports. Granted, that changed things. I think that started getting the ball rolling for women in sports, but
pun intended.
But yeah, no, I completely agree in the sense that, yeah, why are we persecuting people for associating one way but not the other?
You know what's interesting too? So water polo was the first team sport in the Summer Olympics. So think about that. The very first team sport in the Summer Olympics, and only until 20 years ago was there women's water polo.
That's crazy.
I mean, that's a long time to get it established, and then what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And again, I think everyone should be able to compete. I don't want to take that competition away. We have to think, I mean, that's where I'm very curious to hear what people think about it, but I would just imagine there'd be a transgender division, right?
Right, 100%.
I mean,
right.
We got females to get a division, so why not have that as a division?
And we know now, right? Like, looking back, like, as a man, looking back, I think, why the fuck did it take so long for us to get females their own division? Mm-hmm. And so hopefully now we can do this much quicker, right? We don't have to go through this process of, well, transgenders, I mean, do they really need their own sport, right? Like, no, let's just stop. Yes, they do. Let's get them into the sport, right? They deserve to compete. Mm-hmm. They deserve to play at whatever level they want to play with or play at. But it has to be, right? The whole point of competition is creating a level of fairness. That's why people get in trouble for using performance-enhancing drugs. That's why women aren't on the NFL football field, mm-hmm. right? That's why, it's, men, you have a story. Can you share your story? You said you played with men in water polo?
Yeah, we used to scrimmage. So this is in high school predominantly. We mm-hmm. would scrimmage.
Can I ask you, like, personal question? Like, how much did you weigh in high school, and like what's your height? Just like, if you had a.
I'm like, how much did I weigh? Well, I was 5'9", and I've been 5'9".
Okay.
Gosh, I was pretty scrawny in high school, but well, how about college? I really don't know how much I weighed in high school. Probably 130, mm-hmm. but in college 160.
Okay. And then the guys that you were playing with?
I mean, they're over 60.
6 foot?
Over 6. Water polo is like, I mean.
Right, because you have to be able to stand out of the water.
Well, no.
And then be able to.
You don't touch the ground.
Oh, you don't touch the ground. Okay, I don't know anything about water polo. So you're going to have to tell me.
You tread water.
I know you're in the pool and you throw the water. You throw the ball.
No, I guess the East Coast, they're actually the first time I ever played water polo. The East Coast has a lot of shallow, deep pools, but that was something I never knew about growing up in California until I was like, what is this? Like, you can touch the bottom. But no, you typically don't touch the bottom. Okay. Here's the thing. What we would scrimmage against the 14 and under boys team. Okay. So we're an 18 under team, let's say range of ages, or so 14 to 18, but usually the starters would probably be 16, 17, 18. And we're scrimmaging against the 14 and under boys team. And I used to coach them. So I'd get in and play. And man, this, like the center or 2-meter offense, which is like the shack of water polo. So if you think about basketball, shack is in the center. Like that's the same thing with water polo. It's like the biggest person on the team is going to be in there. And I mean, that's the level, is like we had to compete against boys 4 years younger than us. When we did sometimes scrimmage against, the I don't even think we really scrimmaged against maybe sometimes the high school boys, but it was, and this is not like tooting my horn, but I also came from the best water polo program in the nation. We won every single junior Olympics. We won our division, CIF in high school, 3 years in a row. They went on to win a 4th year after I graduated. So this is talking about the best women's water polo team in the nation. And if we would not have, like, against our, say, high school team, like, we'd still get tossed around, beat up, one of
By
our
14-year-old and under boys.
That was an even playing. I would say that would be a closer to an even playing field. And that's also like boys develop later too. So you think about like a high school.
I just looked something up.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Sure. Go ahead.
But then let's say like college, we never scrimmaged against the men. They were massive. They were 6'6", like over 200 pounds. And that's when they start to develop, because they're lifting weights. Yeah, we're lifting weights too, but it's just a different. Here's another example of how men are just physiologically different. Men's water polo in college was the fall season, and we were spring. We trained all through winter break. The boys would be done with NCAAs, go home and drink and eat and not work out, and they'd come back like soft and overweight, and within like a week or two they are ripped and chiseled. And that does not go the same way for a female. For most females, we're not going to drop all of that weight in like a week or two.
So I looked something up just because I was curious, right? When is average age of puberty for both men and women? And it's between 11 and 12 average, right? So 11 and 12 for both. So you're talking, in your case, right, you are playing, that you had been, you had hit puberty, you had gone through years of your hormones pumping through your body to play against boys who had 2 years, 3 years maybe of puberty, right, their testosterone starting to really pump through their body, hormone levels spiking, right, to their highest points. Right, so that just tells you about the science that goes into that, right? That and how, and like you said, men develop even later, right? Because it takes a while for, right, testosterone to kick in, start building muscle mass, that type of thing. And you're playing these boys, and you're still getting crushed by them. So I think that's really fascinating in just the sense that, like, again, why are we having transgender women play against women in sports?
Yeah.
And you said something else, and I lost my thought on it.
And this might like lead us. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say women are built to store more fat. Right? I'm not calling women fat. Women are built to store more fat. Right? It is their body type. Right? Women's bodies, their hips are wider. Right? You are built for one of your superpowers, which is providing a home for another human being for 9-10 months. Right? You are built, right, to be able to give birth eventually. Whether you choose not to or you want to, that's your choice, and that is 100% up to you if you ever want to use that. But that is a superpower, I will never have that opportunity. I can call myself a woman, I can transition into a woman all I want, and that will never be one of my superpowers. And because of that, my body is going to develop differently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to store the levels of fat that you store.
Yeah.
Because fat is what helps protect the baby. Fat is what you're putting on during pregnancy to maintain your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our pelvis is actually like splay out versus point, like our hip, like your hip points of women go out versus forward. So there's just, again, things that are structurally different for a reason. And I also just want to acknowledge women who are not able to conceive, and just really send a lot of love and sensitivity to that, because I know that
Yes.
that is a very challenging experience, and it doesn't mean you don't have the superpower. It just is looking different. So
Absolutely. And I think that's probably a topic we can dive into much deeper, maybe in a later episode.
yeah.
But I agree. And being a man, again, I have no way of ever relating to that, right? Like being, first off, having the ability to give birth and get pregnant, but then not being able to do that, right? Like thinking you're supposed to have that ability, or knowing you're supposed to have that ability, and then not having it. And I can never relate to that, and that's where men need to step up and like acknowledge that, but also be able to be empathetic in the sense that like you don't, well, I'll never understand what it's like to go through that for a woman, and you just have to be there for them in whatever supportive manner that looks like.
And that's, again, comes back to why I don't think we can deny certain physiological aspects, because we can't support women in that situation. We can't support them if we're not acknowledging that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, I said something earlier this week. Union is not uniformity. And I think there's really, like, unify has been a very prevalent word. And we need to understand unifying is honoring differences and bringing people together despite differences, not making everybody the same.
Yeah, there's talk of equality, and I'm about to catch shit for what I'm about to say, but whatever. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but like equality is it's unobtainable, right? Like when you think about what equality is, equality doesn't exist in any species, period, right? So like two men next to each other aren't equal. Right? Equal means just that, right? Equal. That means, right, like 1 is equal to 1. When you look at it in a math sense, it's much easier to explain, right? So 1 is equal to 1. It's never equal to every other relevant of 1. So like 1.5 or 1.25, they're not equal. It's still 1, but it's not equal. So I think that's the easiest way to put it, right? So I think we need to address equity. Right? Equity is much more attainable, right? Where we offer the same things for the people if they want them, right? And but if you don't want them, then we have to understand that what I want and how I live my life is very different than a lot of men possibly, and that's okay. But equality would mean every man is going to get this. Right? Like every man is going to become a hunter, period. Right? And I'm sure there are tons of men out there that want nothing to do with hunting. Right? But that's equal. Right? It's fair. Right? Life isn't fair, and it's not a bad thing. We gotta stop trying to be fair, and we have to just is this what you want? Like, do you want this? Yes? Okay, how do we get you this? as far as, right, so I need to go back and just like address, like, we are all human and we are all equal in our humanity, right? So we all deserve a level of equality in just being human and not having that stripped from us, right? So slavery, right? Like, one group of humans being slaves is absolutely not equal. One group of humans being cooked alive in stoves and gas chambers, that is not equality, right? In humanity, and that's happened throughout um, millennia, right? Through many cultures, right? Egyptian slaves, right? All the way back to all the way from like Egyptian slaves, the Jews, and African Americans being brought here on ships to the United States. Like, right? I think that there is a basic level of equality, but you can't apply it to everything, if that makes sense.
Well, and I think the underlying theme of a lot of these like horrific periods of whether it's slavery or just the poor treatment of certain races was a move towards sameness, right? It wasn't an acknowledgement of differences.
Yeah.
And it was a let's all be the same, and anyone who is not the same is inferior and they are not human. And so we need to be aware if we're moving in that direction, if we're moving in the way of sameness, what's going to happen when someone's not the same? Are we going to repeat history?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Whoa. Oh boy.
Yeah.
A little divergent, but I think we had talked about, there was something you had said, and then I was like, ooh, this is perfect to like go in towards superpowers. And I guess one thing I can kind of merge off of because I mentioned briefly about, thinking like, oh, I should be able to play with males. Like, I lived in the mindset of, one part of it was, don't treat me differently because I'm a female. I want to be able to hang with the boys, and I will prove that I can hang with the boys. And part of that was because there's this big push for, like, I feel like the feminism push was, right, pushing women into, instead of honoring their superpowers, it was pushing them into quote unquote male roles. And then as a result, diminishing the previous roles or some of those superpowers of a female. And so my majority of my life being an athlete, and then in the professional world, when I worked in operations, was a very, what I would say, like, masculine perspective. And because that's how success was defined by society.
Yeah.
And I didn't think I wanted to have children. I was like offended to be treated like a female, these things, certain aspects of the gender roles that I just totally disregarded for a very long time. And until, I would say, gosh, not even that long ago, a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I started to really embrace femininity and again, those biological aspects of femininity. That's when I started to be like, oh, maybe I do want a child. That is so fascinating. Like, our bodies can do what? And I think it's very interesting that when we talk about change for the future, where does that come from? The youth.
Yeah.
So a parent, whether it's a father or a mother, parent is one of the most significant roles if you choose to play it, that we can play, because that is where the change is going to happen. Yet we kind of just diminish the significance of that.
We get to shape the future as the parent.
And obviously there's only so much you can do, but when I worked corporate, it was a female-led company, and they were like, yeah, of course you can be a parent and, be successful in business. They all had night nurses and nannies and this, that, and the other, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's your choice. If I'm going to be a parent, I want to be a parent. I want to be the one molding the future and planting seeds as to my best of my ability. And I think it's a really significant role that's been just shoved under the rug as not, quote unquote, a successful role to play.
Yeah, I have stuff to say, but I first want to just say that I hope people listening and women listening can connect with you on that and can feel that, because I think that there are tons of societal pressures that push women. Like, we got to break the glass ceiling. Yes, there should never have been this glass ceiling. Right, women are fully capable to run companies and be on boards and do all of these things. But it's, again, is that what you want? Right? Or do you want to get pregnant and stay at home and not run a Fortune 1 company and raise your children? Right? That's cool too. Right? And we have to accept that, because we can't let this pendulum swing. That's the big thing, right? The pendulum is swinging right now. And we can't go to the opposite side and be like, well, every woman has to do this. Every woman has to be a career mom. And like you said, having nannies and never home and always on business trips. And I think, right, men noticed that they should have stopped being that and are trying to come back to center. Right? So why should women be going past that? Right? Men are the ones that are always missing the child's baseball game and right on the business trip. They can't get to the choir recital, right? Because they're right, and they make all sorts of Lifetime movies about this. And men have realized, no, I want to change my kid's diaper, and I want to be at the baseball game, and I want to be a part of my child's life, and they're coming to center, right? So I think that it's almost like a sign of warning for women, like, watch out. Be careful. You're gonna swing all the way, right? You went from here, and you're gonna swing completely to the opposite side. And how is it going to take for you to realize that you didn't want to be there either, and that there's happiness in the middle. What the middle is, I think that's for each person to determine themselves.
Yeah, I think it's leaving. Like I mentioned before, we can open new doors, but don't close the old doors. And we should be really aware of what we're glorifying and why we're glorifying it. Yeah. I also want to acknowledge that I know that it's really hard in certain cities to be a one-income family. And so also people who want to have a stay-at-home parent, whether that's a father or a mother, and can't, and they have to work. And just giving a shout out to everyone in that position.
Yeah.
A part of me specifically moving, like, again, making intentional decisions is that it's important for a parent to be involved. And so I'm not going to live in LA or Denver anymore. I'm not going to live in a place where it is really hard to make ends meet without a dual income family. And just think about, like, if that's something that's really important to you, like, weigh out all the options, see what is possible, especially now with so much moving remote. Don't cancel out that possibility of moving to a one income family and maybe moving somewhere that you can afford it. Because that is a reality. And I think it's so wild though, You have to be a dual income family, but then you have to put your kid in daycare, and daycare is so insanely expensive.
My friend, so I can add numbers to this. My friend has one child in daycare right now, $18,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's nuts. He's having a second kid.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, next year it's going to be $36,000.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I don't even know what the average salary is anymore. Right? I remember when it used to be in the 30s.
Yeah.
Right? That isn't an entire salary for two children for both parents to be able to go to work. So you're working to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a lot of families make the decision to keep one parent at home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't afford daycare.
Yeah.
You talked about feminism, and I want to circle back to that and piss more people off. Why not? Since we're here, I think that there's this feminist movement. I think there's two feminist movements, right? I think there's the feminist movement that most people are a part of, and I think a lot of men are a part of, right? And that is I can't say allowing because that's a terrible word. Like just being open to women doing whatever they want to do, right? Being open to women being CEOs and not being a stay-at-home mother, and making their choice on their life. But then there's this feminist movement where I think that the minority of people reside, but it's the louder group of people, and it's I don't need a man to do this for me, mm-hmm. and I open the door for my wife. My wife does not enter a door without it being opened by me, right? If I'm there, right? Well, she's a woman. She can absolutely open the door. I know she is physically capable of opening a door. Mm-hmm. Like literally, there are times it's funny. Like we've been together 14 years, 9 years of marriage, and she still thinks that she has to open the door for herself, and she'll go and she'll still reach for the door, and I swat her hand, and I always open the door for her. And it's nothing of she is physically unable because she's a woman to open this door. It's the exact opposite. It is because she is a woman and she is quote unquote my woman, right? She is not. She should not have to open the door, mm-hmm. right? She deserves better than opening the door, right? And therefore, I am going to make sure that nothing is in her way. Right, and that applies to doors. That applies to anything, right? My goal in life is to provide for my family, right? And this goes into masculinity, or in some cases, toxic masculinity, which I hate. Oh my fucking god! Right, like I am the protector of my family, mm-hmm. and right, it goes back to the anatomical, the hormonal. Differences of men and women, right? I'm not a big guy. I still stand 6 feet tall. My wife is 5'3". Mm-hmm. I'm still 175 pounds. My wife, I'm not going to tell her weight, but she is substantially less than that. Okay? I follow this UFC couple on Instagram, and they're such a cute couple. So they're both fighters. They're both professional cage fighters, MMA fighters. And they do all this crazy shit on Instagram. But then this one time they did this thing and their fans went nuts. Like literally, like they got pissed at them for doing this, which I don't understand why. But I thought it was a perfect example of what we're talking about. They were in their bathroom in their bathing suits, and the goal was the female was going to hold her husband, who's a UFC fighter, professional MMA fighter, underwater in the bathtub, and see if she could do it. And then he was going to do the same to her.
Oh, God.
Yeah, right. Oh. So I shouldn't even have to say how this ends. Yeah. But I'm going to, right? He literally stood up.
Yeah.
She had every ounce of her weight on him in this bathtub. And the guy literally stands up out of the water.
Yeah.
And he puts one hand on her. and she can't get up.
Yeah.
And that is a perfect example, right? So yeah, there's he is the protector, right? Like I am the protector. I'm not saying my wife cannot protect herself, right? But there is a job in being the man, and in modern times even, right? Like in being the man to protect my family, right? To protect my wife, to protect my friends, right? If you ask any of my friends, right? My friend's trying to sell her car right now, and I was like, hey, if your husband can't go, let me know, right? Like to sell your car, right? I will join you, right? It is a man's job to ensure the protection of women. And again, that's a general statement. There's exceptions to the rule. There's probably women that could protect me better than I could protect myself, but those are exceptions to the rule. And it's not a matter of you can't do it. It's you don't deserve to. You shouldn't have to do it.
And I think what to clarify is, if you would to look at a same-sex relationship, there's tends to be, from what I've studied or heard through podcasts, not that everything on podcasts is true. However, is that there, and just, again, from people I know, is there tends to be a masculine and feminine role within a relationship. One maybe plays more of the masculine role, and then another, again, same sex, the feminine. And they even say within opposite sex relationships that dynamic is different, right? The amount of masculinity tends to correlate within each person to the femininity and masculinity. And I like what you said in terms of, it's not that the woman or the female role can't do it, but there is, and we've evolved, I get it, we're in a different society than we were in tribal times. However, there is very significant roles that were played based on physiological aspects of each gender, and that's something that shows up even today. Just the worries and stresses of females versus males are different.
And ladies, if you've ever been in a relationship with a man, we're pains in the asses, right? Like we have a way about us, right? To like, oh, he's being an asshole, or like, oh, he's not showing his emotions. And it's not necessarily that, I think some of us, I think more so right, men are more open with their emotions. And I think that was more of we didn't have the tools back when our grandfathers and fathers were growing up. Right, but men are going to have less of that outpour of emotion in general, where women, right, it's much more prevalent to have that. And when I'm, when my wife is telling me about her problems of the day, it took me years, and God, I wish someone would have told me. Someone probably did tell me, but I probably didn't listen to them, right? But it took me years to realize that my wife doesn't want me to solve her problems. Right? Men are just going to try to solve problems, right? And we had this conversation. We had our friends over for dinner one night, and he was trying to solve his wife's problems, and the men were like, dude, stop.
Yeah.
Like, just stop. Like, that's not what she wants. And yeah, it's an overgeneralization, but again, we have to realize that we're different, in the sense that the way we communicate and why we communicate and what we want. And you told me about this podcast that you listen to, Jason Gaddis.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up with the brain. What you're saying is that actually women's and men's brains are differently.
Yeah.
They release, wherever empathy is released in a different manner for a different amount of time. So it's out of your control.
Yeah. So the guy's name's Jason Gaddis or Gaddis.
Yeah.
And he's Can you explain that? I started following him on Instagram. I love his posts.
Yeah, it's the Relationship School is his podcast, and I believe it's just his name for his Instagram, and he brings his wife on now, and the one episode talks about, he has a doctor on, and they talk about this exact facts, science, that women's and men's brains are different. They also do talk about how homosexual and heterosexual brains are different, and transgender brains are different, but overall, male and female are different. And so I don't know what I was going to go from there.
So there was something else I wanted to touch on. If you think of what you're going to say, let me know. But you brought up, or we've been talking about, right, like men being masculine, women being feminine, and while that's true, there's also, men are not feminine, right? Men don't have feminine energy, right? We do, right? It's just usually the masculinity, right, typically is at a higher level, and then women are the opposite. So I have a really funny example. A few funny examples. First off, my family and my friends and even my wife used to tell me I was gay because of like how feminine I could be and how metrosexual I could be. And right, and it's like, right, like I care about my looks, I care about my appearance, I wear suits, I iron my clothes, I know how to sew, I am, right, like I like The Notebook, right, like I am in touch with the feminine side of my masculinity, right, like, and I'm okay with that, and I have no problem, like, who knows. And there's this game, if you've ever played, it's called Battle of the Sexes. It's a board game. And the whole point of the board game is, like, you're at a party with a bunch of people. Women are on one side, men are on the other. The men have to answer questions that women would typically know the answers to. Women have to answer questions that men would typically know the answers to.
Yeah.
And everyone hated playing with me because they knew that because I was on the men's team, I would win, because I'm able to answer so many of the women's questions. My best friend growing up was a woman. 35 years of friendship. No, more than that. Holy shit. I'm 38 now. So 36 years, 37 and a half years of friendship with a woman, right? Like growing up playing, what's the mall phone? There was all these girl games. Like I was playing with all these girl games with my best friend growing up. Yeah, I'm dating myself now with all these games, but
I told everyone when I went to high school. So,
but yeah, like I had the upbringing of like, yeah, like I'm a man, you're a woman, like cool, we can get along, I can learn about you can learn about me, and we're still gonna have our differences. And the goal isn't to be like each other. And my friend got roped in. I couldn't tell you how many times she's got hit in the face with a ball, or just doing the typical boy sports. And yeah, that's life. That's what makes us different, and I think we do need to embrace those differences.
And I think two things that came up from that. One is also coming back to, again, that idea of women. It's not that women can't do it for themselves, but in the book Tribes by Sebastian Junger, he talks about when, like, the whites, the colonizers, would get kidnapped or taken during battles by the indigenous tribes, that the females typically didn't want to go back to civilization, to white civilization. They wanted to stay in the tribes because the males and females had their roles, but they were honored for those roles. And so even though the female didn't go out to kill bison, or they didn't go out to war, they were respected and honored for their role within the tribe. And I think that is something that would be really important to bring into our modern society is, again, instead of saying, hey, woman, you go put pants on and be a CEO. No, why don't we just honor these superpowers, these strengths that we have naturally in us, this nurturing tendency? Again, there are 1 out of 10 who maybe don't have that nurturing tendency or don't have the desire to be a mother of some sort. And that can be a dog mom. Like, it doesn't, you know what I mean? And I think that is what, if we can start just honoring these really unique aspects that are related to, and not even just genders, just individuals as people, like, we're going to do ourselves more of a service. And now I can't remember part 2. So that's good. I was fully in it there. But that just kind of like is this idea again of where people can be whatever they are, right? And
yeah, and just because you can doesn't mean that you should too. Chris Rock has a sketch where he says, being a single mother, yeah, you can do it. And this is Chris Rock's words. I'm not getting it verbatim, but he's like, yeah, you can be a single mother. Doesn't mean it's a good idea, right? And I think right, jokes are funny because there's a level of truth to them, right? And I think that you can absolutely be a single mother, and I know many of them, and I know great single mothers who have done amazing things with their children. But to have a male figure in that child's life, growing up and demonstrating what masculinity looks like, from a male perspective, being the protector, being a provider, in a sense, right? The mother can absolutely be a provider. I'm not saying that they can't, right? But knowing that, setting the example of what a man, a quote unquote man, is supposed to do. Right, we have these hormones in us for a reason, right? These testosterone levels are born into us for a reason, and right, even looking at a transgender, so I guess it would be a transgender man. So a woman who was born in the wrong body is now a man, right? They start taking testosterone. And you don't take testosterone just to say, oh, because I'm taking testosterone, now I'm a man, right? Yeah, there's things that come with testosterone, right? There's hair, right? I have a beard, you don't, Bre.
hey,
you should. Most women are thankful for. Most women are thankful for that, right? Huge muscle structure or huge muscle growth ability, comes with testosterone. Right, when you think about muscles and strength, strength is never a weakness, right? And I feel like we've turned it into this masculine guy, great, let him be strong. Being strong, there's nothing ever wrong with being strong, right? Physically. And even mentally, right? Showing that strength, and it's okay to still be weak at times, right? It's okay to cry. It's okay to, break down, and I'm not even going to get into mental health. Our listeners should know about how we feel about mental health from prior episodes, right? But I don't even know where I'm going at this point anymore. But yeah, my point is just that, to have testosterone through your veins in your blood is requesting a very specific thing. So to say I'm a biological woman, and I was born in the wrong body, and I'm supposed to be a man. Okay, well, tell me what that's supposed to look like, right? Because there's right if that is true, which it is, tell me what is a man. Right? Well, there's things that a man is supposed to be that they don't have. That's why that they're missing that. That's why they have mental health issues until they transition, right?
So there's
And
an
then they get those-
acknowledgement that there's differences.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
If
right?
there were no differences, you wouldn't want to be. It wouldn't matter.
Right. Exactly. 100%. Right. There's the answer to it all. Is it wouldn't matter. Oh yeah, no, I have this body, and my body is the same as that body, and no. The woman who wants to transition to a man wants to be a man because of strength and testosterone and aggression and right, and no one is saying aggression is good, but there is good aggression, right? Like there are things that is important in being aggressive, being an ice hockey player, and being frail, right? Like you are going to get your ass beat, right? And so it is important to acknowledge the differences, as you have said.
I remembered.
All right, go.
Okay. And then I thought of something else too.
You need a notebook to write this
I
down.
know. But then I'm not listening. I want to listen fully, and that means forgetting sometimes. You had talked about different within each person, different like embracing masculinity and femininity. Like a male doesn't just have masculinity. There's levels of femininity. And there is a very actually like important part of marrying those within yourself that I know in shamanic astrology they talk about it, but just in general I've heard this in different even like relationship kind of based ideas of really being able to embrace both of those within yourself, whatever percentages, or at times one's more prevalent than the other. And with that, okay, oh no, I'm trying to make this not sound all over the place. But with that, I think that's where male role models for males are important. And so when you talk about the father, yes, you can, there's nothing wrong with being a single mother or a single father. Mm-hmm. As a young boy without a father, he has no role model. He has no one showing him those ways of masculinity or even how to embrace aspects of femininity with masculinity. And I do think a lot of male fathers do tend to maybe go heavier on the masculinity, but that's because then there's this balance of the feminine or whoever's playing the role of the mother within that relationship. Mm-hmm. And so it's why they even say that it's important, like even with mentors, children and mentors, someone who's like the same gender and race will typically have a better impact on that mentee because there's similarities. And it's not to say that you can't have a variation of that, but there's research that's been done. I mean, that's something that's been a big conversation. And so and even though your parents aren't necessarily your mentors, it's important to have a mentor outside of your parent, because those play very different roles. However, there is a significance of having the male figure in being able to kind of pave the way, right? And like, how do you manage that aggression? And the father gets to, for a son who doesn't know how to manage his aggression, right? Like, this is this new thing coming inside of me. I'm like, I have all this testosterone going, I don't know what to do with this. Mm-hmm. The female just can't understand. Like, I will never understand what it is to have that experience within myself, and I can only say from my perspective, right?
Yep.
And so that's just kind of the idea of like different levels of masculine and femininity, and like balancing that out and within yourself, and finding the marriage within yourself so you're not seeking it outside.
I want to piggyback off of that, but I want you to remember your second point that you wanted to make, unless you made it.
I went into it with the male role model.
Okay, all right,
yeah.
All right, perfect. So on that point with role models and your parents, look at this movement that we're seeing now of television, movies, superheroes, of superheroes that look like me, and not look like me, right? We have Black Panther, right? Because why, right? Like oh, now I can relate. Now these children, now these black children can relate to a superhero. Oh, he looks like me, right? Females, right? Why is it so great to have uh, I'm sorry, I should know this, our vice president's
Kamala Harris.
makeup. So she's what, Indian and African American or Jamaican, whatever. Right? So her skin is darker, right? Why is it great to have a female in the office of vice president? Why is it good to have a female with different skin color in the office of vice president, right? Of different ethnicities. Because now those little girls can connect and say, oh, it makes sense, right? And it's the same, exactly what you're saying, right? For men, if I'm this kid looking up and I have this male role model to look up to that looks like me, that acts like me, and helps me handle that aggression. I remember that aggression as a kid, like 11, 12, 13 years old, and not understanding like why I was angry, and just not being able to control it. So having that role model, I think you're 100% right. And I think that we're seeing that in so many different ways, and we can't ignore that for men, for women in general.
And I'm going to belabor my point.
Please
because the saying future is female, right? That's a big statement, right?
Yep.
Let's honor all possibilities for female. So I feel a lot of the future is female is this, again, idea of, I think it's great. We have a female vice president. So if that's someone's path, they can believe they can go into that. But let's not say the future is female as long as you're playing the roles of a male, right? So future is female because you can be like an incredible mother and embrace that femininity, the nurturing that's within us. You don't have to change who you are. You can be that nurturing person in those roles as well. You can be that nurturing person as the CEO of a company.
Absolutely.
So that's, again, I'm going to really drive it in.
Sorry, I'm looking at my notes.
Only because I feel like now the voice for that is gone. So
Yeah.
I'm all about, I think it's, the voices get really loud for certain areas and then not for others. And so, again, I'm not saying don't go be a successful businesswoman if that's what you want, but I want to be the voice for the female roles that like have been just disregarded, diminished, or just not honored.
They don't want to be the female businesswoman and mother. They just want to be the mother. And I totally understand that. And I hope our listeners understand that too. That we're not saying there's a right way, that it has to be this or it has to be that. That we just have to honor what people want. And we can't just say equality for all. Here, everyone gets the same thing. Equality is not good. You don't want the same thing as everyone else. I said it before, and I'll belabor this point. Right? What I want in my life as I grow older is very different what I wanted when I was 20 years old. It's a totally different topic, but it's relatable, right? Like, I no longer want the things that I wanted and the things that I thought what a man was supposed to be.
And I think I would actually love to hear, I think with males, you kind of brought up this idea of emotions, right? And it's okay to cry. And so just understanding a little more maybe of your own, if you've had a journey with your own masculinity being shut out on certain things, and then if you now feel like you can connect more or differently than you did on emotional or vulnerable levels, and how that looks in like the male population. Because I know there's a lot of men's groups coming up, or the past few years there's been tons of men's groups, and I've noticed just even my male friends and it's not robbing them of their masculine, like that masculine aspect, but they're able to connect on, I'd say, just a deeper level. So it's not like
Yep.
ladies of just very emotive necessarily. However, they're connecting on a deeper levels with other males, and how powerful that has been. And so I'm fascinating with like the role of the father, but then maybe that's where the role of the mentor comes in to allow the space for vulnerability.
Yeah, I can tell you about my journey and yeah. So I can tell you about my journey. I don't know that I can speak about for all men, and I can tell you like how I am now, and where I was. So I absolutely. So first off, my parents, my father who's dead now, my mother, she's 69. Uh, they did a phenomenal job of teaching me the right things in life and how to be. Um, and I feel like I got the right balance of masculinity and femininity. Um, my I think my mother demonstrated masculine traits, as well as feminine traits, and I think my father did the same. My father was an auto mechanic, so I learned how to work on cars. Right, I'm able to get my hands greasy, and I know how to turn a wrench. Right, that Neanderthal mentality. Right, men just ugh, right. But my mother taught me how to sew. I still sew to this day. We have a sewing machine in our house. I use the sewing machine. I can sew a button. Right? Most people have no clue how to sew a button onto, an article of clothing. I can sew a button. Like I am fully capable of using a thread and a needle, and a sewing machine, and right, using my feminine side to do things, to survive. Like that's the other thing. Like I never was like, oh yeah, I know how to sew. That makes me a girl. No, I know how to sew. That makes me a functional human being.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
Like,
This
I'm
is like
fucking
fixing things. Like I love to know
right.
how to. I want to be able to do as much on my car as possible, because I to survive.
100%. So I'm going to go on a few tangents here, but keep me in line, Brie, and keep me back to your question, because I really think I have something to share there. My neighbors right next door, two kids, two teenage young adult kids, probably their 20s, college age, single mother, uh, boy and a girl. So daughter and the son is older, the daughter is a little younger, and they're probably like freshman in college, sophomore in college type age. And I come home one day, and the two of them are outside looking at their car with this flat tire. They have the jack up, and they're trying to change this tire, and they're just spinning the lug wrench. Right, the wheel's already off the ground, and so they spin the lug wrench, and the wheel spins, and so they can't figure out for the life of them how to change this tire. And I chuckle inside. I'm like, oh, this is funny. Like I should just sit here and just watch this hilarity ensue, but that's not me. So I get out, and I'm like, okay. I was like, I have one question. I was like, are you late to work? He's like, yes. I was like, do you need to get to work right now? And he's like, no, they know what's going on. I was like, great. I was like, you get to change the tire instead of me. And I was like, and you get to watch and help. And talking to his sister. And I was like, because after today, I was like, neither of you are going to be in a situation where you're not going to be able to change a tire for yourself. And so I walked them through. I was like, walk them through the process. I'm not going to go through the process of how to change a tire on this podcast. And it took a little bit longer than me just changing the tire myself. Right? If the kid was late for work and he had to get to work, I was just going to do it myself and just get the guy to work. But it being what it was, I walked them through it, and like they both thanked me. I saw the mother later in the week. The mother was like, thank you so much for showing both my kids how to change a tire. And she goes into this long dissertation. This is the longest conversation I've had with this lady about how there's no father figure in the house, and she feels bad, like her kids not being able to learn that. And by no means was I trying to strip that from her, or, right, and like she knew that, right? But no means was that like negative. Like they didn't know how to change a tire, which boy or girl, female, male, adult, right, whatever you are, you should know how to change your tire. You should be a fully functioning human being, and you should be able to change your tire, just like you should be able to sew a button on a pair of pants or on a jacket. And that's all my parents taught me to do. And I think that we need to make sure that our next generation continues to learn how to be all of those things, right? I don't need my wife for me to survive. How many men would die because they don't know how to cook, right? I'm the cook in the house. Literally, I do 90% of the cooking in this house.
Yeah.
Like the kitchen is my area. Right? That's a woman's role, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No,
Yeah,
I really, one of a good friend of mine, this couple, they're early 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and the husband's like, she doesn't do my laundry because she's not my maid, you know? And so, like,
Right.
that's the thing to think about. Like, we're talking about like certain roles of the females, but it's not like these are just basic. It's not one or the other, right? It's a deeper femininity and masculinity aspect than just like these,
Yes.
almost the idea of the male and female in the 50s. We're talking deeper
Yes.
here. So back
Oh
to you.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, my father cried, and he showed me that it was okay to cry. But he also showed me when it was okay to be tough, and when it was okay not to, like, you were not allowed to cry. And there's times for that, right? There's times that you have to step up and you have to be the man, and you cannot cry in that moment. You get to cry later, but in that moment, you have to fulfill your duty and obligation as a man, and you have to do whatever that task is. And more recently in my life, again, right? Unfortunately, I sorry I'm being cryptic. It involves personal things in mine and my wife's life that we're not sharing
Yeah.
yet, and but more so in my life right now, I've had more of those moments where I couldn't. And like right now, I'm getting choked up, and I hope I don't cry in the air. But like more so, I'm not in a position where I'm supposed to cry. Like I'm supposed to not cry in that moment, and handle what's right, and then I get to cry later, and make sure that my wife's taken care of. Sorry.
No apologies needed.
So my point is that I got both the masculine and the feminine. It is that I was taught that yes, you're allowed to cry, and there's times when you're allowed to do that, and then there's times when you're not, and you have to honor those, and you have to understand why, because you're the protector, and you have to make sure that you are protecting, and while you're crying, you can't protect, right? So I lost my train of thought. There's so much more I want to touch on. So being masculine and size. So I'm gonna, if you have questions, like, feel free to ask. But like my size, I've always been small. I've posted on social media. Right, like when I was in high school, I was 6 foot still, and I was 100. And so before I joined the military, I was 109 pounds. And to get into the military, I actually had to lie about my weight, and then I had to, like, because then they like test you, and I had to like finagle things to get in, and I was like eating my recruiter had to give me a bunch of MREs, and he like tried to fatten me up, but I've always been just smaller. Again, knowledge. I think this goes back to the food episode, right? Knowledge and growing up low class. I didn't have the things and the tools that I have now, also to help me grow into more of the size that I am, that I'm more happy with. But I can tell you, being a smaller guy isn't masculine, and it fucking sucks, right? Because you're always trying to get acknowledged as a guy, right? Like, especially when you're around these other big guys. And more so, what I've learned is it's more of my problem, not theirs. Right? It's these problems that we make up. Like, oh, they don't think. Right? I didn't have self confidence because I was smaller, and because I'm hanging around, these other bigger guys, and like, I wish I had muscles, and it was never. Right? Like, I never understood. I didn't have the tools and the knowledge and the discipline to get muscles, and I'm okay saying that now.
So would you say that the masculinity was not necessarily being a small guy, but then your mentality or attitude around being a small guy?
Yeah, 100%. It's almost like that little guy syndrome, right? Like I still am 6, right? Like, and then people say things to me, and I still live that small guy mentality too, right? Like now, I'm not huge by any means, but I am. You can tell I work out. Like you can tell I do things and I eat right now, um, but I still feel small. And when I look in the mirror, I still look small. And people will say things to me, and it doesn't correlate. The connection isn't made. Even when I was small, like I supposedly have big hands, and like I would shake people's hands all the time, and they're like, "Wow, your hands are massive," and that means nothing other than like, yeah, like I'm actually like my hands are the normal size for how tall I am and how big I am, and to me that's like, oh, I'm not this tiny little puny little thing, and it just didn't connect. Or I was on a business trip, and again, right, for opening doors for my wife, it's not just my wife, it's women. I open doors for women. If I'm around a woman, I'm going to open the door for you. Again, not because you can't, because you deserve better. And I was on a work trip, and I was opening doors and just being polite and being gentleman, right? Like we should bring back being a gentleman and not like associate it with like taking away your feminist rights.
Gentle man.
Yeah, gentle man, right? And this my coworker, she says to me, she's like, "Oh, you're so masculine. I need you around more." Because like I'm like, and to me that did not click. Yeah. I'm like, what? Like that, it just never. It's not a. I don't have those receptors.
Yeah.
Right. And one of my things that I've been working on for myself is like learning how to take a compliment. And so she said it, and while I'm saying in my mind, "No, you're not," I was like, "Thank you," and I said, "Thank you," and then I had to stew on it for like months, and I'm clearly still thinking about it. But yeah, like to think that, right, if women think men don't have insecurities, clearly here I am telling you them. I don't care. My vulnerability, absolutely. Like I think if you come to my yoga classes, if you follow me on social media, you know I'm very vulnerable. Like I don't care at this point in my life, like what I share, because that is who I am. And I think it's my job to set an example for what a modern man should be. And is it right? I don't know. I'm going to go with what I think is right. And what I think a modern man should be is, and you're getting pretty much a gist of that through this episode, is, right, a protector, someone whose roles, right, like doing the dishes, right, these male-female roles, like you said, these high-level, surface-level roles, right, none of those matter. You should be a functional human being as a man, right? You should also be able to cry. You should also be able to protect. You should also be able to act funny and goofy and oh, I can't do that because I'm a man. And you should also be able to fail and fall flat on your face, and you should be able to, and I'll go into the next point of how I also try to demonstrate that my friendship is tell your friends, both men and women, that you love them and hug them and touch them. Like I grew up my father hugged me a lot. And I think that was a demonstration, right, of what a man should be, and my friends get hugs, right? And if you're a man, you might not be used to that. My friend, I'm mentioning my friend from India again. He loved that I mentioned him. He wrote us an email. He loved that I mentioned him on the last podcast. My friend from India grew up. His parents were in arranged marriage. His parents tried to arrange him. Right? He's our age, and they tried to arrange him into a marriage. And I asked him one time. I was like, "Have your parents?" He's like, "Do you recall your parents telling you that they love you?" And he was like, "No." And it wasn't a bad thing. It just is what it was. And he knew that they loved him, but it's just not something that he was used to. And so for me to tell him that I love him is very, very different. And for me to hug for me to hug him, and for me to hug my friends that just aren't probably used to being hugged by other guys, like, because that's the manly thing to do is the bro hug. No, like, I'm giving you full hug. Like, you're getting a hug. I'm going to hold you. I'm going to squeeze you. I'm going to show you that I actually care about you and I love you, especially if you're my friend.
Well, all the bro hugs, like the pat on the
Yeah.
center of the chest.
Yep.
Bros, you are clearing out that person's heart chakra when you're doing that. So it's not as bro as you think. You're moving some energy when you tap the center of the back. You're clearing out that heart chakra. I know. You thought it was broy, but underneath.
Yeah, see,
More
you're doing
intuitive
damage and you don't even know it.
than you knew.
Yeah. I think, there's probably something to it, right? And maybe more so, maybe it's the energy that you're giving and receiving in that type of hug, right? Like you can't fully commit, like, oh my God, right? Like, no, like I fucking love you. Like, why wouldn't I give you a hug? Like, you are a part of my life. You impact my life in positive manners, and that's why I keep you around. That's why I invite you over for dinner. That's why I hang out with you. That's right. Like, why are we so afraid of telling people we love them, and why are we so afraid of showing affection, and what the fuck does that have to do with being a man? And so for me, like, it was never, growing up and then seeing that, but then I was like, no, this is what a man's supposed to be, and I'm going to be the example, and I'm going to be awkward. Like, and you ask any of my friends, like, I'm fucking awkward, because, like, I'm just going to say what I'm thinking, and I'm right, whether it's right or wrong, and I'm going to hug you, and I'm going to tell you I love you, and I'm going to do all those things that socially are probably, or I don't even want to say not acceptable, just not used to. So, but yeah, anything else on the journey of, so now, like, my masculinity, I don't know that my masculinity is ever in question, and I never feel like someone can take that from me. Hunting and killing an animal, I don't, it didn't make me more of a man to kill an animal, right? If you look at that from hunting, I think, again, it goes back to functionality, right? Like, if the world were to, end today, and you were all by yourself, are you going to be able to kill an animal? Yeah, okay, but now you have men in your life, and you shouldn't have to. We're going to go do it for you, right? You should get to, right? Like, I don't want blood on your hands. And there are tons of women who hunt, and we want to get more women into hunting, right? Because you should be able to do it. You shouldn't have to do it, just because
I want to do it.
Right? Yeah, and again, I want you to do it, but I don't want you to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like that constant battle. I want you to do it because I want you to be able to do it, but I don't want you to do it because you shouldn't have to.
You shouldn't have to. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so I think that I'm okay with who I am. I'm okay sharing that, and I hope that I can set an example of who men are supposed to be, and if I'm ever blessed with children, I hope that I can set an example for the future generation. And this is another thing. Sorry, let me go into that. So, my nieces, specifically, right? I want my nieces to know what a man should do for you. And I want to be the example. And when they're dating, when they start meeting guys, and they know how I treat them, they go, you're not good enough. You're not good enough because you're not opening my doors. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. You're not bringing me flowers. Right? Like, yeah, you can go get your own flowers, but you shouldn't have to. And I'm going to bring you flowers, whether you want them or not. I bring my friends flowers. My friends who are married, I bring them flowers. Right? Because you're awesome. You're women. You're amazing. You're incredible. And you deserve it. And you deserve to know how you should be treated. And you should be treated by gentlemen. And I want to make sure that my nieces and all other women expect nothing but the best for themselves, because you are worthy of the best. You are never not worthy of. You never deserving of someone to beat you, right? To mentally abuse you. Right? You're deserving to get the best treatment ever by every man. And if that does not happen, you should be able to say this is unacceptable and move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's important is just, I think, male role models and
Mm-hmm.
coming back to just a lot that has come to light, a lot more conversations around, and again, this happens to both males and females, but a lot more conversations in the media, in the public, and just accepting a lot more of the like sexual abuse type of, or
Mm-hmm.
just abuse, doesn't have to be sexual, coming to light is again where I see our children. The children are right. Where are we guiding them?
Mm-hmm.
What are they seeing as examples? You can say all you want, but how you show up is going to be more impactful than what you say. And
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of work on both ends, but also we've also progressed, and we have to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge where we have evolved, and that we still have evolving to do. So.
100%. And that we're never going to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
We have to understand and acknowledge and be okay with that it's never going to be right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you said it on the last episode, our job is to fix the problems that the last generation caused for us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because in doing the right things, right, it's science, right? Like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So if you do something else happens in turn from doing that thing. And we take risks in our lives in hopes that the good outweighs the bad.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to be ready to admit and acknowledge that, okay, that was bad. The bad definitely outweighs the good. And maybe we shouldn't go back to where we were, but maybe there was something in the middle that we missed there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to just be ready to, I brought this up on the last episode, listen. Not just hear, but actually listen to what each other are saying. And we're so quick to have our own thoughts about things and be ready to just give you, like you said, you don't want to take notes because you want to listen. And I appreciate that. But I also don't want you forgetting your thoughts.
If I forget, it wasn't that important.
So, yeah, I think that we are work in progress. And I think that's part of being that role model,
Mm-hmm.
is admitting that you're a work in progress and admitting that
Mistakes.
I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
I mean, this would, I think, when we go into past selves episode is more,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go down that direction because I know we have that planned at some point,
Yep.
but it's just taking things with you. Like this was about this past self, this worked, this didn't serve me, I'm not taking this on. And same thing with when we think about gender roles. And, I had a mentality of like being super like I went male mentality or what I would call a masculine mentality as a protection mechanism for stuff that happened to me in my past. And that falls in line with also career-wise, but it was very trapping for me until I was then able to like embrace like my femininity and say like I don't want to, like that was like my protection mechanism for that time, but it doesn't serve me anymore. And that's also not masculinity. Whatever idea I had around it and what I was trying to live through is not masculinity.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so
that's huge. Acknowledging, right, like I'm not supposed to cry, period. End of sentence. That's not masculinity. right? To your point, right? Like we have these ideas of what masculinity and femininity is supposed to be, and I think we have to absolutely do what you said. At some point, look back at our past selves and realize that that's not it, or we have to help show our children what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like is there anything?
I'm looking at my
That's like
notes. I have other things that I wanted to touch on, but it doesn't make sense to bring them up at this point, and I feel like it'd be just be beating a dead horse, and I feel like we are at a great point to journal prompts, if you think so.
Yeah. Unless there's anything in those notes, you really just want to lay it out there, but I feel...
No, it was all just... Again, it would just be going back to like hammer home the point, and I feel like I made my point without having... without saying those things. So
we didn't even talk about superpowers that much.
So we didn't talk about them because we did talk about them. Like everything that we talked about is the superpower, right? Like it's a superpower to demonstrate your masculinity, whether you're man or woman. And it's a superpower to demonstrate your femininity and understanding the situations to use those things. And that's the superpower.
And the marriage of the two is the magic, right? Like that is something we can't deny. Like there is so much magic that comes from the marriage of the masculine and the feminine.
Right. And that applies to yourself. That applies to your physical marriage, whether it be same-sex marriage, whether it be civil partnership, civil union, whatever, like you're not married, you're just together forever. That applies to your friendships, right? Like as friends, you balance each other out, right? Like each of you bring different things to the table, and it's important to know when to bring those things to the table. And those are superpowers. And there's physical superpowers like getting pregnant and carrying a baby. And yes, some people can't do that. And for the men, there's some people that can't get a woman pregnant. Right, and that's something else too, right? That's a superpower that you've been robbed of. There's probably a million other things out there that are superpowers, but I think that in not talking about our superpowers, we did. Like we've mentioned it all and how we're all unique, and we have to recognize, and this goes into another topic that we're going to talk about on the episode, is finding your why. I think that's also in relation to your superpower. Finding your why. How do you find your why? How do you live your why? That's my final thoughts.
Awesome. Journal prompt.
So, journal prompt.
I want to say one thing actually.
Yeah,
this is important because I think I actually didn't learn about this term for a while, mansplaining.
Oh yeah.
And I want to. This is for the men, okay? I've been mansplained, okay, plenty of times. I've also been experiencing a lot of men that are doing it in a very appropriate way. And this is what I'm going to give. I'm not saying don't give people feedback, don't do that, right? Or women feedback, because usually that's the dynamic of the mansplain. But someone recently climbing was like, do you want some feedback on that last pitch of climbing? And I was like, yeah, thanks. I would love some. So it's, you can still mansplain or give feedback. Ask for permission first. And it'll go over so much smoother. So if you ever get a girl who like flips out on you because you mansplained, just ask for permission.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. I think permission and I think intent is important too. Like how you come at it. If you're coming at it from I know everything because I'm a man, and you're a woman and you don't know, so I'm going to tell you. I think that is, I think that shows.
Yeah.
So.
And it goes for anything, right? Like how often do we give unsolicited advice to our friends?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So.
Or gentlemen, our wives.
Like
when your wives are talking to you about a problem, they don't want an answer.
Yeah.
I can't say this enough.
Ask for permission.
Stop giving them solutions, and I'll give you the key phrase. How are you looking for me to support you?
There you go.
Because at that point, I put it back in my wife's court. I'm being supportive.
Mm-hmm.
I just want you to listen.
And females
Great.
trying to get through to a male, not that I'm an expert on this, how can I support you?
Yeah.
Same thing, right?
Huge. Yep. How can I support
It
you?
could be like,
It's a great question.
leave me alone.
For sure.
Let me go work out, whatever, have that conversation, ask for permission, ask how you can support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Communication is critical in everything.
Yeah.
So with that, communicate with yourself by pulling out your journal. We talked about a lot. We talked a lot about a lot of heavy topics, and we talked about things that might have triggered you, and you might not agree with us on, and that's okay. I still love you, and whether I know you or not, I do. If we can hate without regard, then we can also love without regard. But know that your opinion is right too, and as is mine, and as is Bree's, and it all comes from our experiences in life, and so I think it's important that we listen. So just grab your journal and write maybe your thoughts about why we're wrong, or maybe your thoughts about how you're going to open up and maybe understand a different perspective, or maybe you want to ask us questions and you're going to reach out to us on social media or on our email address, and you want to write those questions down. Do all those things. Write about your feelings. Write about the time, men, that you wanted to cry that you didn't and that you should have. Write about how you're going to be more masculine. Write about how you're going to be more feminine. Write about the balance of the two, marrying the two. Write about what are your thoughts on masculinity? Like, is it at that surface level? Is it these tasks? Is it women do the dishes and vacuum and clean the house and do the laundry and men go work? There's still a lot of cultures that I think believe that, and that's your truth. So just write about that. And yeah, feel free to reach out. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to talking with you again.
Yeah, thank you for being different, everybody. Thanks for your superpowers. If you want to follow us and our adventures, you can find both of us on Instagram. I'm at Bre Allison. That's BreAllison.
And I am at The Life of Alan Tatone, underscores between each word. To check out our offerings, yoga, one-on-one trainings, workshops, retreats, and a recorded library, you can find the info on our website, thehunterandthehippie.com.
If you have questions for the podcast, about the podcast, feedback, suggestions, or just want to say hi, or find ways to work with us, our email is thehunterandthehippie.podcast@gmail.com. And don't worry, all of this will be in our show notes.
Thanks for tuning in
Hopefully you weren't tuned out.
to the Hunter and the Hippie podcast.